I've got with me Alfred Garcia of AP Securities joining us here for the full hour. 4.0%. Alfred, that was quite a shocker, wasn't it?
That was a shockingly low result. So the most pessimistic forecast that I've seen is 4.3. And I thought to myself, that's too pessimistic. But apparently, we got a 4.0.
Right, and the news is just coming out, and as we speak, we're just waiting for the peso to start trading as well as at the Philippine Stock Exchange. As we're seeing right now, in parallel with the release of the results is Maynilad's IPO listing. How do you think it might do on a day that third quarter GDP came far lower than forecast?
Obviously, there will be a knee-jerk reaction given the super disappointing GDP result. But overall, Maynilad should be able to weather this because it's a defensive play. It's a utility company. So it should not be that, it's going to be more of a sentiment thing.
A sentiment thing, which could be pretty critical. It is the final IPO of the year. It's the biggest, one of the biggest in PSE history. I know that you've done a detailed study on it, and you do call it a defensive play. But in what way is that going to be a defensive play right now, given the conditions that we have in our economy?
In a sense, Maynilad is since it's a utility company, you would expect the demand for its services would remain fairly constant regardless of the economic activity, especially since especially the demand coming from the residential sector, for the residential segment of their customer base, because regardless of how the economy is doing, you still use water at home. So that's why it's defensive, and we see its earnings as fairly predictable. Most of its demand is tied to population growth rather than economic growth. So that's why we see it as a defensive play.
Okay, well, let's talk about the concession because it is the west side, so there's still a
Right.
bit of history here. There is Manila Water with the east concession. How is it differently placed right now that there are going to be two water concessionaires listed at the stock market?
Okay, interestingly, speaking about the concession area, it's about a third of the size of Manila Water's concession area, but it has a higher population, it has more customers, and it generates more build volume. So this is mainly because it's a very dense area, and it's rather an older part of Metro Manila. So that's why there are some factors influencing Maynilad's ability to operate.
Okay, well, hold that thought. We are going live now to the Philippine Stock Exchange where the speeches are happening as we speak just before the listing of Maynilad. Let's listen in.
Led by Chairman Manuel V. Pangilinan, Vice Chairman Isidro A. Consunji, and President and CEO Ramoncito S. Fernandez. Representatives of the Joint Global Coordinators, Joint Book Runners, and all underwriters for this IPO, members of the PSE Board and Management Committee, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Recently, there have been a few doomsayers pontificating on the moribund state of our stock market. Some liquidity, sell out by foreign investors, and eroded investor confidence. Yes, our market is indeed facing headwinds, both global and local, resulting in the PSE index being down 10.6% year-to-date, or 8% on a total return basis, which includes dividends. But the Philippine market is not the only market that is going through some challenges. Not to go far, another ASEAN exchange is likewise facing its own problems, with its index down 8.1% year-to-date. Unfortunately, these doomsayers constantly propound in public the problems they perceive in our market, thereby reinforcing the already negative perceptions of the investing public in our market. They forget the saying that something said often becomes truth, meaning people are more likely to believe a statement is true if they keep hearing it repeatedly. I believe that in every problem or crisis, there is opportunity. The same is true for our market. Despite the supposedly unfavorable conditions prevailing in our market, the three companies, Oceana Gold, NextGen Energy, and Citicore Renewable, who had their IPOs in 2024, have seen their prices increase by 103%, 101%, and 56% respectively since their listing. Similarly, the only company, top line, that braved the IPO market so far this year has rewarded its investors with a return of 323% since its April listing. Maynilad Water Services, Inc. will be the second company to do an IPO this year. Coincidentally, it will also become the second biggest IPO in PSE's history, with 34.34 billion pesos worth of shares sold in the maiden offering. I understand the actual demand for this IPO was 2.7 times the firm offer. More than the amount, there are a few things that set Maynilad's IPO apart from the others. First, Maynilad had two foreign multilateral lenders, ADB and IFC, investing $245 million in this IPO as anchor investors, and 6 other foreign investors participating as cornerstone investors. Clearly, disproving the doomsayers' claim of foreign investor disinterest in our market. Second, Maynilad is a second listed firm supported by Mobilis, one of the investment vehicles under the British Investment Partnerships program of the United Kingdom. Third, the Securities and Exchange Commission had awarded the country's first Philippine Green Equity label to Maynilad, which affirms the company's continuing adherence to sustainability standards. Finally, Maynilad is the first IPO since 2008 where the President of the Philippines will be ringing the bell for its listing. Maynilad is known as a pure-play, sustainable water and wastewater solutions provider, addressing UN Sustainable Development Goal number 6, which is about ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Maynilad's sustainable business activities will be further supported by this IPO, as it will use majority of the capital raised to fund its water sources and treatment programs aimed at water security, including the development of future water sources, enhancement of operational efficiencies, and climate proofing of its capital assets. The continued growth and expansion of Maynilad has been made possible through the strategic, governance, sustainability, and leadership direction provided by pillars in Philippine business. Maynilad's chairman, the deal maker extraordinaire, Mr. Manny Pangilinan, and vice chairman, turnaround business leader, Mr. Sid Consunhi. Mr. Pangilinan and Consunhi have gone through the repeating cycles of the stock market. They understand that whether market conditions are perceived to be good or bad, capital raising will always be beneficial to a company that has a relevant story to tell and one that can maximize the deployment of funds for growth. Before I close, I would like to call on all the capital market stakeholders here to exploit and focus on the bright spots in our economy and our market, not the problems. Inflation is below the government's target. The IMF and ADB project continued steady growth for our economy and expect it to remain resilient. On the market side, earnings of listed companies are up 16.8% for the first half of this year. CMEPA, or the Capital Market Efficiency Promotions Act, which took effect last July 1st, reduced the stock transaction tax from 0.6% to just 0.1%, and has resulted in increasing the average daily trading volume in the market to 7.21 billion pesos from 6.1 billion last year, up 18.2%. CMEPA has also increased by 50% the tax deduction for PERA contributions to encourage more companies to adopt PERA for their employees and trigger more trading in the market. As I end, I want to congratulate Maynilad Water Services, Inc. on its very successful IPO. As they say, fortune favors the brave. We wish you all the best as you continue to carry out your mission of providing safe, affordable, and sustainable water solutions that enable those whom you serve to lead healthier, more comfortable lives. Thank you very much, and may you all have a great day and a weekend ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Monzon. To give his message, may we call on Maynilad Chairperson Manny V. Pangilinan.
Where's Joan? Yeah, I need that knee replacement. Okay. Your Excellency, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., Excellencies, distinguished guests, good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the President for joining us this morning, and congratulations, Mr. President, for the encouraging news on inflation and the unemployment numbers. Congratulations. 18 years ago, we took on a company that was taken over by the government due to rather serious operational and financial difficulties. We believed then, as we do now, in the critical role that water plays in our people's lives. The Maynilad story for the past 18 years is one of transformation and growth. In 2007, connections stood at about 699,000. Now we serve 1,651,000 customers. Billed volume then was only 262 million cubic meters, and now we will breach the 500 million cubic meter mark for the full year 2025. In terms of coverage, Maynilad's network provides service to 95% of the 11 million people in the west zone of Metro Manila. So from an ailing water utility, Maynilad is now a world-class water and wastewater services provider. This has enabled us today to open our doors wider to a new set of investors, both local and international. But this list is not just about franchise compliance, nor is it simply about capital raising. It is above all a commitment to continue delivering an essential service to our people with excellence and integrity. Thank you, Mr. President, for the attention and care and vigilance you're giving to the water sector. We thank the Philippine Stock Exchange and the Securities and Exchange Commission for their help in guiding this IPO. Thank you also for giving us the country's first green equity label. Our appreciation likewise goes to MWSS, our partner in ensuring that the water franchisees fulfill their public service mandate. We thank our new investors for their confidence. We are humbled by their overwhelming response, which signals confidence in our fundamentals and in the attraction of the Philippines and its capital market. To our financial advisors and underwriters, thank you for your faith and support. Finally, to the men and women of Maynilad, thank you for your dedication and professionalism. You are the reason this company has turned challenges into service and into success. So in closing, let me just say that within this single molecule called water dwell many of the potentials of the Philippines. We at Maynilad will work hard to ensure that water supply remains consistent and adequate for our people. As a nation of 7,000 islands or so, we must not simply consume this God's creation, but work together to harness its blessings. And this collaborative philosophy is what shapes and defines Manila today. We are thankful that we have your government, Mr. President, which shares this view. Many congratulations to all, and again, good morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson Pangilinan. At this point, may we call on the Chairperson of the Securities and Exchange Commission, Attorney Francis E. Lim, to introduce our guest of honor.
Messages all we've heard from Chairman MVP of Maynilad, congratulating PBBM in the audience right now for the upbeat inflation and unemployment results.
Republic of the Philippines, His
Let's listen in.
Excellency Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.
Thank you to the SEC Commission Chairperson Francis Lim for your kind introduction. Please, the Excellencies of the Diplomatic Corps, Philippine Stock Exchange Chairman Jose Pardo, Philippine Stock Exchange President and CEO Mon Monzon, Maynilad Chairman Manny Pangilinan, Maynilad President and CEO Ramoncito Fernandez, executives and employees of Philippine Stock Exchange and of Maynilad, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We mark today a milestone for our country's water sector, our stock market, and for our economy. The listing of Maynilad Water Services on the Philippine Stock Exchange is a sign of confidence in our markets and in our people. When Maynilad began operations more than 2 decades ago, the challenge of bringing clean and reliable water to every home in the west zone of Metro Manila was clear. So, what started out as a concession has since evolved into a partnership that continues to serve millions of Filipinos every day. This listing invites more investors and voices into the journey of managing a precious resource. With its initial public offering, Maynilad welcomes scrutiny and accountability. And in doing so, Maynilad can expand our capital markets and our shared belief that private enterprise can serve the public good. This also sends a message that transparency is a standard that all our institutions must abide by. Additionally, Maynilad's sustainability programs, including a climate-resilient water system, investments in renewable energy and waste management, watershed protection, these are all acts of stewardship that have future generations in mind. All these initiatives align with our government's agenda to build an economy that is adaptive and guided by sound governance. I'm also pleased to note that this occasion reflects a greater partnership between the public and private sector, where each side contributes to our shared prosperity. So truly, Maynilad's public listing signals what I have been telling the world, that the Philippines is open, ready, and eager to do business with you. To our partners in Maynilad, never lose sight of the people you serve. Be assured, the government is always in support of your initiatives, especially now that you have entered this new phase in your service. As we face the many challenges ahead, from climate change to the rebuilding of public trust, may this day remind us that reform is built on work done with honesty. Because I believe that when we do things with purpose and excellence, progress will flow just like water that is steady and life-giving. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang Maynilad, mabuhay ang bagong Pilipinas.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, may we request the President to please remain
President
on
Marcos reiterating there, the Philippines is open, ready, and eager to do business in the Philippines. Just moments to the listing of Maynilad, one of the biggest in the PSE's history. Marcos has invited more investors to come in to the capital markets as third quarter GDP at the top of this hour, just about 26 minutes ago, comes in slower at 4%. And that's a lot slower than most of the analysts that we had taken into the median forecast. At 4%, it is a lot slower than the Business World's median forecast of 18 economists, who had it at 5.3%. And even Alfred, joining me here in the studio, had it at 5.3%. Alfred, and as we're seeing, peso is holding on to 58.94 to the dollar. That's the first thing that we wanted to see at 15 past this hour. What do you make so far of the reaction?
So far, I think the Philippine peso is not reacting yet. Maybe the market's giving it some time to digest. But yeah, basically the GDP report was disappointing, yes. It was much lower than what we expected.
Time check, it's 9:26
and it was surprising.
Yeah, it is. And I see that you've been very busy with your mobile phone as you've been tracking the pre-order trades for Maynilad. How is it looking right now, and what is it going to say at the start of trading?
So far, I think there's a bit of some selling pressure on Maynilad at the open. Most likely tied to the knee-jerk reaction that we are expecting from the disappointing GDP report.
How bad could it get then if you're seeing all reds?
We'll have to see. We have 3 minutes to go.
That's true. And as well for the broader markets, the PSEI, the link as well to the economy, very tightly knit, even as we've seen very upbeat messages from our government officials.
That's right.
Well, we're just about 3 minutes away from the ringing of that iconic bell. I see that they've just put out two bells, the two iconic bells. Do you know the history of that,
Oh,
Alfred?
no, I didn't.
They all come from the former exchanges in Manila and Makati stock exchanges. So one of them comes from either of that. It's been a very contentious history, as you know. So when they came to the agreement that it would be a unified exchange, to bring in those two bells into the Philippine Stock Exchange at the the BGC. There is a unification bell that I haven't seen, but today what we're seeing is the chairman, MVP, ringing the bell on the left side of your screen to be one of those former bells. And Tito Pardo and also President BBM flanked on the other bell.
The offers was supported by a mix of international and domestic cornerstones investors, including IFC and ADB. Last 2 minutes, I know we're all excited for the opening of trading today.
It is going to be pretty special because they chose 8 rings for some reason, or ring the bell for 8 times, the lucky number 8 there. And look at that shiny bell there. I'm sure it got a good cleanup. It's lasted a whole history because, as you know, the Philippine stock market is the oldest in Asia. And, you know, we're often teased as being also, well, a bit of a laggard. So that's something that the government really wants to solve and wants to, you know, get going, especially with Maynilad's IPO, one of the biggest in history of the PSE. We're just about less than a minute to the ringing of the iconic bells. The strike at 9:30 a.m. That means that Maynilad is going to be the newest addition to the main board of the Philippine Stock Exchange. As you can see, both those gentlemen have already clutched onto the iconic ropes.
All right, we have 30 seconds to go.
So we're at 15 to start. So we want to see, Alfred, if we're going to get any higher or lower with the bids and the sells.
20 seconds remaining. I know everyone's
Just
excited.
about 20 seconds to go.
Let's get ready for the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Mr. President. At this point, may we request the President to kindly grant us a photo
For
opportunity.
Maynilad making history as one of the biggest maiden offerings at the PSE, the biggest since 2021. Its market cap now hovers at 113.2 billion pesos, making it the Philippines' biggest listed water concessionaire.
First, may we call on stage the PSE.
Well, still with us here is Alfred Garcia, research head at AP Securities. So how are the opening trades looking, Alfred?
It hasn't opened yet. I'm not seeing the opening price yet.
Okay, but then we did see those pre-trades, and that pretty much is an indication of where the price goes next.
That's right. It seems that it looks red right now, but I'm not seeing the opening numbers yet. It seems it opened at 15, but it's now trading at around 14.98.
Got that, 14.98, so it's below IPO price. But I know that you did a very comprehensive study going into this IPO listing, and you've seen a bit of an upside, albeit very marginal.
That's right. So our initial valuation of Maynilad, we estimated it to be valued at around 16.14 per share. So that's slightly higher than the IPO price. But we do have that 5.8% dividend yield that we're looking at for 2026 because Maynilad has a dividend policy in place which basically maintains a dividend payout of 40 to 50% of previous year's net income.
So that's pretty generous then.
That's very generous, and that should yield around 5.8% for 2026 because they already paid out the 2025 dividends.
And do you think that that is going to continue, considering that they're on an expansionary phase, and it might take some time before they give out dividends again?
Well, based on what we've seen, Maynilad has enough funding to fund its capex requirements, which is also helped along by the proceeds from the IPO. So they should have enough cash to pay out their dividends moving forward.
But it's not that this IPO is going to fund everything.
No, it's
Because
not.
a portion of that will still remain unfunded.
That's right. So I believe that Maynilad is looking to fund that through a mix of equity and debt, a bit more heavier on the equity.
Well, as you point out as well, Maynilad also has less access to fresh water supply, and it is the smaller of the two concessions right now.
That's right.
With Manila Water, the bigger one, but it has a bigger population.
It does.
And thus more billed customers.
That's more billed customers, that's more operating revenues, and that's more build volume for Maynilad.
So what would that mean then, given the expansion that it has and considering that it does have less fresh water supply?